Welcome back to another World of Warcraft lore supercut. In this video we're diving into the full history and background of the original Alliance starting zones. First on our stop, we'll journey to Dun Morogh, exploring the origins of the Dwarves and the Gnomes, and uncovering how they came to settle in the snow-covered mountains of Khazmodan. After that, we'll set sail for Kalimdor. We'll have a look at the rise of the Night Elves, how they built one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known, and then the tragic events that led to its downfall. And then finally, we'll return to the Eastern Kingdoms to revisit the story of the Elwynn forest. Naturally, in this video, some stories may be touched on more than once, but allowing the lore to overlap where it fits helps create a more relaxing and coherent storytelling experience. But with that being said, whether you're winding down for some sleep, looking for some lore-rich background noise to study to, or simply in the mood to relax with some Warcraft history, this video has you covered. Let's kick this lore supercut off with one of the coziest zones in Azeroth, Dun Morogh. The story of Dun Morogh traces its roots back to some of the oldest legends in the world of Azeroth. Today we recognise it as the homeland of the Dwarves and the Gnomes.
Blah 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 blah. Time to move on.
But this snowy expanse wasn't always their domain. To truly understand how these stout and often short-tempered folk came to settle in these frozen lands, we need to start at the very beginning of their remarkable journey. And stay with me on this one, it all comes together quite nicely. Over 150,000 years ago, the Pantheon of Order, a group of god-like beings known as the Titans, roamed the cosmos on their divine mission to shape and organise worlds. Drawn to a quiet corner of the universe, they discovered Azeroth, a planet harbouring a dormant world soul, a vast reservoir of energy capable of awakening as a Titan, much like those who made up the Pantheon themselves. However, Azeroth was infested by the old gods, malevolent entities sent by the Void to corrupt the world soul. These beings had established the Black Empire, commanding armies of monstrous creatures and insectoids to spread their corruption. To combat this threat, the Titans created an army of races known as the Titanforged to wage war against the old gods and their Black Empire. 9 of the most powerful Titanforged were chosen as leaders. Known as the Titan Keepers, their job was to guide the races such as the Tol'vir, the Mogu, and Ironforge. Among the many Titanforged races, 3 of them are crucial to the tale of Dun Morogh: the Trogs, the Earthen, and the Gnomes. These races would go on to shape Azeroth's history and play a pivotal role in the story of this snowy region. Let's shift our focus to the core of Dun Morogh's story. The Trogs, brutish and misshapen, played an unexpectedly important role. These creatures were the first of the Titanforged races, created by the Keepers in Ulduar's Forge of Wills. However, they were deemed failures, flawed prototypes, and were eventually replaced by the more refined Earthen, beings of living stone designed to shape Azeroth's mountains and subterranean regions, and the Gnomes, crafted by the Keeper Mimron to maintain the Keeper's machinery. While these creations succeeded in aiding the Titans in ordering Azeroth, the Trogs remained a lingering problem. Unable to destroy their defective creations, the Keepers sealed the Trogs in the Vault of Uldaman, constructed by the giantess Ionia. Though some escaped, most remained in stasis for thousands of years, while the Earthen and the Gnomes continued their noble work. Yet their story took a much darker turn with the rise of Loken, a trusted keeper whose betrayal would forever alter Azeroth's history. Around 20,000 years ago, Loken, corrupted by the old god Yogg-Saron, accidentally killed Sif, the wife of his brother Thorim. To cover his crime, he framed Arngrim, the frost giant king, sparking a war. Loken then created armies through the Forge of Wills to restore order, unaware that Yogg-Saron had tainted the forge with the curse of flesh. This affliction would transform the Titanforged, such as the Earthen, the Vrykul, and the Gnomes, into mortal beings of flesh and blood, altering their destinies forever. Loken's corruption deepened as he killed fellow Keeper Mimron, subdued Hodir and Freya, and manipulated Helya into imprisoning Odin. With Ra missing and the others incapacitated, only 2 remained. Tyr and Arcadus remained uncorrupted. Alongside their giantess friend Ionia and a group of Earthen, Gnomes and Vrykul, they fled south with the Discs of Norgannon, an artifact detailing Azeroth's history, in hope they could uncover the full scope of Loken's betrayal. Enraged, Loken sent the monstrous Cathrachsi, servants of the old gods, to hunt them down. In a heroic stand, Tyr sacrificed himself to protect his companions, ensuring that the discs and the truth escaped Loken's grasp. This significant moment would set the stage for the events that would follow, including the stories rooted in the snowy peaks of Dun Morogh. After Tyr's sacrifice, Arcadus and Ionaea fled to Uldaman, expanding the site to protect the discs of Norgannon. They vowed to safeguard the artifact at all costs. But over time, some of the accompanying earthen began to show signs of the curse of flesh, their rocky forms softening. To ease their fears, Arcadus placed the afflicted into hibernation, promising them that a cure would one day be found. Many earthen were sealed within Uldaman, while others stayed awake alongside the Mechagnomes to guard the site. Arcadus and Ionaea eventually retreated to Uldaman's deepest chambers, devoting themselves to trying to find a cure. After years of research, they too entered hibernation, leaving the Mechagnomes and remaining earthen to maintain the facility. 10,000 years later, the Great Sundering shattered Azeroth, causing the remaining earthen to feel the planet's pain. They tunneled deeper into Uldaman and sealed themselves in hibernation. Only the Mechagnomes remained awake, and over the next 7,000 years, they slowly succumbed to the curse of flesh, transforming them into the beings we now know as the Gnomes. Abandoning Uldaman, the Gnomes sought refuge in the nearby mountains, leaving behind a single Mechagnome. For the next 500 years, this lone Mechagnome attempted to maintain Uldaman as it fell into disrepair. Eventually, she transformed into a gnome herself, but in her dying breath, she freed the hibernating earthen. However, those who awakened were no longer earthen. The curse of flesh had turned them into dwarves. Like the gnomes before them, dwarves left Uldaman to settle in the nearby mountains. Over time, both the gnomes and the dwarves gradually lost their connection to their Titan origins, forgetting the knowledge of who they once were. Drawn by the safety and marvels of deep places, dwarves established a vast kingdom beneath the tallest mountain in the land. They named this realm Khaz-Modan, meaning Mountain of Khaz, all in honour of the Titan shaper, Khaz-Goroth. At the heart of their new kingdom, they constructed a grand altar to their Titan creator, building a mighty forge within the mountain's core. The city that then grew around this forge would forever be known as Ironforge. Inherently captivated by the art of shaping stone and gems, dwarves delved into the surrounding mountains, mining for precious minerals and uncovering the treasures hidden deep within the earth. As their influence expanded across Khaz-Modan, dwarves stumbled upon another remarkable race, the Gnomes. Fascinated by the Gnomes' advanced technological expertise and feeling a deep kinship with these inventive beings, the dwarves assisted them in constructing a city of their own. Just west of Ironforge, the Gnomes established the city of Gnomeregan. Perched high in their mountain strongholds, the dwarves thrived in Ironforge, while the Gnomes tinkered away in their subterranean workshops within Gnomeregan, drawing upon the abundant riches and resources of their mountainous homeland. Now, there's a certain irony in calling this land a homeland. While the dwarves and the Gnomes settled here and built prosperous lives, another word for this story that might be more fitting to what actually happened is conquered. And as with most stories throughout history, where there is a victor, there must also be the vanquished, and in the case of Dun Morogh, those who were displaced from their native homeland were the Ice Trolls. Stepping back in time, we know that ancient Kalimdor was once dominated by the mighty Troll empires. Across the vast expanse of the continent, the Trolls reigned supreme, with their influence divided among the Amani Empire, the Gurabashi, the Zandalari, the Dark Trolls, and then finally the Drakari, who controlled the northern reaches of ancient Kalimdor. The Drakari were further divided into two tribes, the Frostmane and the Winteraxe. While little is known about the history of these two tribes, it is clear that their influence once spread far and wide. However, the Great Sundering, which shattered ancient Kalimdor, left much of the Drakari Empire in ruins. The tribes were scattered, with the Winteraxe finding themselves in the Alterac Mountains and the Frostmane Trolls finding themselves in the snowy peaks of Dun Morogh, both now cut off from their Drakari kin in Northrend. Separated, the Frostmane Trolls carved out their own existence in the snow-covered mountains and endured for thousands of years. Their isolated survival continued uninterrupted until the arrival of the Short People.
Watch your back.
Since that time, the Frostmane Trolls have been locked in an unending conflict with the Dwarves, battling over the land they once called home. To the outside world, the dwarves of Dun Morogh appeared to be an unstoppable force, yet within their kingdom, change was on the horizon. For many years, the dwarven kingdom of Ironforge thrived under the rule of High King Modamus Anvilmar. Trade agreements and alliances with the northern human kingdoms brought immense wealth, funding grand projects in Khazmodan like the Stone Wrought Dam. However, despite its prosperity, Ironforge was far from peaceful. Their society expanded beyond what their mountain city could sustain, and tensions were brewing between its three dominant clans: the Bronzebeards, the Wildhammers, and the Dark Irons. The Bronzebeard clan, led by Thane Madoran Bronzebeard, maintained strong ties to High King Anvilmar and served as the defenders of Ironforge Mountain. The Wildhammer clan, ruled by Thane Cardros Wildhammer, lived in the surrounding foothills and crags, striving for greater influence within the city. And meanwhile, the Dark Iron clan, under the leadership of sorcerer Thane Thorsan, dwelled in the mountain's deepest recesses, plotting against both the Bronzebeards and the Wildhammers. The fragile peace between the three clans crumbled upon the death of High King Anvilmar. He died from old age, and it plunged Ironforge into a brutal civil war. After years of conflict, the Bronzebeards, with their superior army, emerged victorious. The defeated Wildhammers and Dark Irons were banished from the mountain. The Wildhammers established their own kingdom in Grimbatol, while the Dark Irons retreated to the Red Ridge Mountains, where Thorsan secretly plotted his revenge. Seeking to dominate all of Khazmodan, Thorsan and his sorceress wife, Modgud, launched a two-pronged assault. Thorsan attacked Ironforge, while Modgud laid siege to Grimbatol. The Dark Irons nearly succeeded, but Madoran and Cardros rallied their forces and repelled the invaders. Modgud was killed in the defence of Grimbatol, forcing the Dark Irons to retreat, while Thorsan himself fled after his forces were defeated. With the newfound alliance, the Bronzebeards and the Wildhammers marched south to eliminate the Dark Irons. Desperate, Thorsan summoned a powerful ally to turn the tide, but inadvertently unleashed Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, whose fiery rebirth destroyed Thorsan and enslaved the Dark Irons. Faced with this elemental threat, the allied armies halted their advance, unwilling to confront Ragnaros and his destructive forces. The aftermath of the War of the Three Hammers left scars on both kingdoms. Modgud's death tainted Grimbatol with dark magic, rendering it uninhabitable. Madoran offered the Wildhammers a place within Ironforge's borders, but they declined and relocated to the peaks of Lordaeron, establishing a new home at Airy Peak. To maintain ties, the Ironforge dwarves constructed the Thandor Span, a massive bridge connecting Khazmodan to Lordaeron, enabling trade and prosperity between the two kingdoms. In honour of their shared struggle, the sons of Madoran and Cardros commissioned great statues at the southern pass in Loch Modan, serving as both a warning to invaders and a reminder of the war. And so, for the next 200 years, the dwarves continued in this state, with the Bronzebeards firmly ruling Ironforge and extending their influence across Dun Morogh and beyond. However, life on Azeroth was on the brink of monumental change. 2 centuries later, the Dark Portal opened, unleashing the Orcish horde upon Azeroth. The First War began in the year we now call Year Zero, and within 3 years the human kingdom of Stormwind had fallen to the horde's onslaught. As the Second War loomed, Ironforge received urgent warnings from the King of Lordaeron about the growing Orcish threat. It wasn't long before Khazmodan itself came under attack. During the Second War, the Orcish horde launched a devastating campaign across Khazmodan, targeting both Gnomeregan and dwarven strongholds. The city of Gnomeregan faced a direct siege, but the orcs were thwarted by the ingenuity of the gnomish inventors. After weeks of fruitless assaults, Doomhammer abandoned his siege, leaving the Bleeding Hollow clan, led by Kilrog Deadeye, to ensure the gnomes remained trapped by maintaining a blockade around the city. Meanwhile, the Bleeding Hollow clan continued their relentless assault on the dwarfs, systematically destroying numerous strongholds throughout their region, but Ironforge held firm against Kilrog's forces. By the war's end, the Alliance of Lordaeron defeated the Bleeding Hollow clan, liberating Khazmodan and securing Ironforge's place in the Alliance. Following the victory, King Magni Bronzebeard appointed his younger brother, Muradin, as Ironforge's ambassador to Lordaeron. The dwarves' unwavering loyalty to the Alliance was evident during the Third War, with the events of the 20th year proving pivotal for Dun Morogh. As the undead scourge swept across the lands, Ironforge dispatched forces to aid Lordaeron against the growing threat. During this time, King Magni Bronzebeard received devastating news. His brother, Moradin, had been killed by Arthas during the prince's quest for Frostmourne. I don't think he actually died in the end, but for dramatic purposes, he died. Shortly afterward, High Inquisitor Fairbanks and Alexandros Mograine approached Magni with a plea for help against the Scourge. Seeking to honour Moradin and retaliate against Arthas, Magni forged the legendary blade, the Ashbringer, as a counter to Frostmourne. Now, with all of this going on within Ironforge, in contrast, the loyalty of the Gnomes was called into question during the Third War. For years, the Gnomes of Gnomeregan had been invaluable allies, supplying advanced weaponry, vehicles, and troops to the Alliance on the warfront. However, following the fall of Lordaeron, the Gnomes abruptly withdrew all aid, leaving their allies puzzled and strained. It was only after the Third War that the truth emerged. So you might wonder, why did the Gnomes suddenly vanish from the war effort during the Third War? And the answer lies in an ancient, persistent, and unsightly problem that had resurfaced. Over the millennia, the sands of time had eroded much of Uldaman. The ancient Titan complex built by the Watcher Ionea, most of it had been lost, reclaimed by the earth. The Dwarves, driven by their insatiable curiosity and a deep, though not fully understood connection to this ancient place, began excavating the site. One fateful day, a group of explorers ventured into the halls of Uldaman, and what they discovered within would forever alter the course of Dwarven history. The Dwarves, during their excavations of Uldaman, inadvertently uncovered the ancient stasis chambers of the Trogs, and awakened the long-dormant creatures. Once the distant cousins of their Titan-forged ancestors, the Trogs, like the Dwarves and the Gnomes, had succumbed to the curse of flesh. Now beings of flesh and blood, these hunched, hairy creatures with sharp claws and foul tempers were hideous shadows of their already hideous former selves. The awakened Trogs attacked with brutal ferocity, slaughtering most of the Dwarven explorers. Only a few survivors managed to escape the carnage and fled back to the safety of Ironforge. Unbeknownst to them, the Trogs had been tunneling beneath the ground, silently following their every step. As the Trogs advanced toward Ironforge, their attention was caught by the sounds emanating from the nearby gnomish city of Gnomeregan. Intrigued by the mechanical whirring and the tinkering noises, they shifted their course, setting their sights on the Techno City. In a swift and devastating invasion, the Trogs stormed Gnomeregan. To avoid pulling Alliance troops away from the critical fight against the Scourge in the north, the leader of the Gnomes, High Tinker Mechatork, made the fateful decision that the Gnomes would defend Gnomeregan on their own. For 5 long years, the Gnomes valiantly battled the invading Trogs, but were ultimately overwhelmed. The Trogs, relentless and cunning, bypassed their defences by tunnelling into the engineering quarters. Desperate to turn the tide, High Tinker Mechatork agreed to a drastic plan proposed by his advisor, Sicko Thermoplug. The plan was to flood the lower levels of the city with radiation to eliminate the invaders. Mechatork went with it, and the plan backfired. The radiation released not only killed countless gnomes, but also made the surviving Trogs even more violent and dangerous. Nearly 80% of the gnomish population perished within days, while others were tragically transformed into mindless, malevolent leper gnomes, left behind in the ruins of their city. Among the surviving leper gnomes was Sicko Thermoplug, the very gnome who had devised the plan to flood the city with the toxic radiation. With their city in ruins and uninhabitable, the few surviving gnomes fled to Ironforge, seeking refuge. In the aftermath, debate raged among the gnomes about their next steps. While some urged for an immediate effort to retake the city, Mechatork decided instead to focus on supporting the Alliance, leaving the reclamation of their home for another day. By the time the last gnome cast a final glance back at their fallen city, time had marched on, bringing us to the 25th year since the Dark Portal first opened in the Eastern Kingdoms. This marked the year when the heroes of the Alliance were called upon to bring order to the turmoil in Dun Morogh. The Frostmane trolls, seeking to reclaim their ancestral home, had emerged from their caves and strongholds to wage a fierce campaign. Meanwhile, the Trogs ventured beyond the ruins of Gnomeregan, encroaching upon the territories of both the Gnomes and the Dwarves. Adding to the chaos, rogue leper gnomes sowed havoc where they could, and the region's wildlife, unsettled by the conflict, became increasingly aggressive, with wolves, bears, yetis attacking the travellers. In response, an influx of dwarves and gnomes rallied to defend the region. Despite some initial victories, Dun Morogh remains under siege, and the struggle to secure the land continues to this very day. During this time, King Magni Bronzebeard, ruling over Ironforge, had recently welcomed the Gnomes to seek refuge within its halls. He even granted them their own quarter to expand upon. The Gnomes and Dwarves eventually dispatched a rescue team of adventurers on a daring reconnaissance mission into the toxic halls of Gnomeregan. What they uncovered down there was a dark and chilling truth, and to learn more about that story, you can check out the dedicated tale of the lore of Gnomeregan. Our portal is linked in the description below. In the 28th year since the Dark Portal's opening, the Gnomes' long-awaited plans to reclaim their city reached a critical moment. After years of preparation, Gelbin Mekatork launched Operation Gnomeregan, calling on both the Gnomish people and the Alliance for support. Under Mekatork's leadership, the Gnomeregan exiles, alongside their Alliance allies, assembled at Steel Grill's depot, the staging ground for the offensive and the production site for their formidable Meccano tanks. Once preparations were complete, Mekatork led a bold assault to secure Gnomeregan's airfield, establishing a surface command post as a foothold for their new operation. From there, the forces pressed into the lower tunnels of the city, pushing toward its irradiated heart. However, Psychothermoplug, the self-proclaimed ruler of Gnomeregan, revealed his final weapon, the Irradiator 3000. As the Alliance forces reached the city's core, Thermoplug activated the new device, flooding the area with deadly radiation. Unable to disarm it in time, Mekatork was forced to order a full retreat, teleporting his troops to the surface and sealing off the city once more to allow the radiation to subside. Despite being unable to fully reclaim Gnomeregan, Mekatork considered the operation a strategic victory. The Gnomes had struck a major blow against Thermoplug's forces and established New Tinkertown, a foothold near the city's gates. The battle to reclaim the city raged on, turning it into a war zone. The Gnomeregan exiles, alongside brave adventurers, clashed with the leper gnomes loyal to Psychothermoplug, fighting to control their beloved city, piece by piece. In this heated conflict, the G-Team, an elite gnomish task force, played a pivotal role. Working with the adventurers, they carried out daring operations deep within the irradiated halls of Gnomeregan. Their efforts culminated in a decisive strike against Psychothermoplug, finally eliminating the self-proclaimed ruler and breaking the back of his forces. Now, Gnomeregan and New Tinkertown serves as the starting point for new gnomish adventurers, with quests focused on continuing the fight to drive out any remaining threats and reclaiming their home. As the drums of war echoed through the halls of Gnomeregan, unrest was also brewing in the grand city of Ironforge. Shortly before the Cataclysm, Azeroth entered a period of elemental upheaval. The elements, agitated and chaotic, launched invasions on major cities of both the Alliance and the Horde. In Ironforge, King Magni Bronzebeard personally defended the commons from the elemental onslaught, but the troubling state of the world demanded deeper answers. During an earlier exploration of Ulduar, the Dwarves had uncovered a set of ancient Titan tablets. Believing they held the key to understanding the elemental unrest, King Magni decided to activate a ritual inscribed on the tablets to commune directly with the planet. Magni ventured down into the depths of Old Ironforge, where the ritual would take place. Rather than communing with the planet, the ritual triggered a transformation, binding Magni to the very stone of Azeroth itself. His body turned to shimmering diamond, his form fusing into the heart of Ironforge. Yet, the situation worsened when Magni's estranged daughter, Moira Thorsan, returned to claim the throne, bringing her infant son, heir to both the Bronzebeard and Dark Iron clans. Backed by Dark Iron forces, Moira seized control of Ironforge, holding the city hostage. To prevent further chaos and political collapse, King Varian Wrynn of Stormwind intervened. To balance the power of the warring clans and maintain stability, Varian called for the formation of the Council of Three Hammers. This ruling council, composed of representatives from the Bronzebeard, the Wildhammer and the Dark Iron clans, succeeded Magni and ensured that all dwarves had a voice in the city's future. 2 years later, in the 30th year since the opening of the Dark Portal, while much of Azeroth was captivated by the mysteries of Pandaria, trouble was brewing in Dun Morogh. King Varian Wrynn's scouts uncovered a growing threat. The Zandalari trolls were rallying the Frostmane trolls to attack Ironforge. Seeing an opportunity, Varian believed aiding Ironforge against the trolls would secure additional dwarven troops for his campaign against the Horde. However, he underestimated the deep mistrust among the three dwarven clans. When Varian approached the Council of Three Hammers for assistance, both Moradin Bronzebeard and Falstad Wildhammer declined. They feared that if their forces left to fight the Frostmane trolls, Moira Thorasan and the Dark Irons would exploit their absence to seize full control of Ironforge. To his surprise, it was only Moira who stepped forward, pledging the Dark Irons' loyalty to Ironforge, the Council, and the Alliance. Determined to prove her clan's worth, she offered to lead the defence alongside Varian. With the High King, his champions, and the Dark Iron Dwarves at the forefront, the Frostmane assault was repelled, and Ironforge was saved. Upon their return, Moradin and Falstad were overcome with shame for allowing fear and distrust to cloud their judgment. They vowed never again to let suspicion divide the dwarven clans. 4 years after King Magni Bronzebeard's petrification, in the 32nd year since the opening of the Dark Portal, to the shock of both Moira and advisor Belgrum, Magni awoke, his body now a living, moving statue of shimmering diamond. With a voice like a rumbling mountain slide, he declared that he now spoke for the land itself, a living embodiment of Azeroth. By dwarven law, as the rightful ruler, Ironforge was his to claim. However, both Moira and Falstad knew that neither the Dark Iron nor the Wildhammer clans would willingly kneel to a Bronzebeard king. When Magni returned to the High Seat, he addressed the Council of Three Hammers directly. He revealed that he had not returned to reclaim the throne, for he was no longer a king, but a servant of Azeroth. His purpose was to deliver a grave warning. The Burning Legion was returning, and all of Ironforge's people, Bronzebeards, Wildhammers and Dark Irons alike, must unite to face the coming threat. Without delay, Magni announced that he would leave Ironforge to spread this warning to the rest of the Alliance, departing to fulfill his new role as Azeroth's voice. Magni's warning proved true. Not long after, the Burning Legion launched another invasion, and they used Dun Morogh as one of their key staging points. The Legion struck the snowy mountains with brutal force. Though the battle was fierce and the odds overwhelming, the united strength of the Dwarves and their allies ensured that Dun Morogh would not fall without a fight, and eventually the Legion was driven out of the region, allowing the snow-capped mountains to return to a semblance of peace. And ever since the Legion was driven out of Dun Morogh, the region has remained relatively peaceful. Only the minor nuisances of trogs, trolls and wandering beasts disturb its quiet. Ironforge still stands proudly as the heart of dwarven heritage, successfully governed by the Council of Three Hammers, a full-circle resolution to the long-standing conflict between the clans so many years ago. Meanwhile, the quest to reclaim Gnomeregan continues. Though progress has been made, the toxic radiation and lingering threats still prevent the gnomes from fully restoring their city. But as we close the chapter on this war-torn yet deniably cozy zone, remember, in Azeroth, peace is but a fleeting breath. And even the mightiest strongholds of iron and stone must prepare for the storm that always looms on the horizon. The mountains of Dun Morogh have stood strong for generations, and will they continue to endure the challenges that arise? Okay guys, we're approaching the half an hour mark now, and I hope you're all feeling relaxed. And if you're starting to drift off, then that means this video is doing its job. Up next, we're crossing the Great Sea and setting sail for Teldrassil. So let's dive into the history and the lore of this majestic world tree. Before we continue, it's important to touch upon the deep background lore of the Night Elves. Their story is vast and intricate, but I'll focus on what matters most to today's story. Around 15,000 years ago, a tribe of dark trolls, tired of war and conflict, settled near the radiant waters of the Well of Eternity, the source of all magic on Azeroth. Over time, the well's energies changed them. They grew taller, their skin turned violet, and their minds expanded. They shed their old troll ways and began a new life. They came to worship Elwynn, the moon goddess, and through dreams, visions, and old relics, they began to understand their place in the world. They discovered the name of Kalimdor for the continent they lived on, and came to call themselves the Kaldorei, the children of the stars. As their influence spread across the continent, their presence was noticed by ancient forces. Among them was Cenarius, a wise and powerful demigod who took the kaldorei under his wing. He taught them the ways of the wild and the balance of nature. With this help, the kaldorei flourished. They built their capital, Elwynn, beside the well, and lived in harmony with nature and magic. But not all kaldorei remained faithful to this balance. Some of them, especially the elite members of the society, were drawn to the arcane. These elite kaldorei were known as the Highborn. During this Night Elven age of power, Queen Azshara rose to the throne. She was loved and revered by all, and the capital was renamed to Zin-Azshari, meaning glory of Azshara. She shared the Highborn's obsession with the Well of Eternity and encouraged them to push its limits. They obeyed her without question, burying themselves in magical study and experimentation. Their reckless use of arcane magic sent waves through the fabric of reality, reaching even into the twisting nether, an otherworldly plane of swirling chaos, bridging the infinite worlds of the universe. These disturbances drew the attention of Sargeras, the Dark Titan who sought to wipe out all life in the universe. Seeing an opportunity, he turned his gaze to Azeroth, and to reach the planet, he needed help from within. Xavius, Azshara's trusted advisor, was the first to hear Sargeras' whispers. He mistook them for a divine message and brought them to Azshara. Enamored by the Titan's power, she and her Highborn welcomed Sargeras, believing he would purify and remake the world in their image. Xavius began to channel the well's power to open a massive portal beneath Azshara's palace. Through it, demons of the Burning Legion began to pour into the world. Fellhounds, dreadlords, and other horrors spread across Kalimdor, destroying anything in their path. But not all Night Elves stood with Azshara and her belief of a new world. Malfurion Stormrage, the first druid, recognized the threat and formed the Kaldorei Resistance with High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind and Commander Jared Shadowsong. Together, they prepared to fight the growing madness. Sargeras, sensing this resistance, ordered the Legion to wage full war on Azeroth, but the world did not stand alone. Cenarius, the Ancients, the Dragon Aspects, and other races like the Tauren joined the fight. Even Illidan Stormrage, Malfurion's brother, took up arms against the Legion. While Malfurion worked to collapse the portal, Illidan and his allies fought their way to the Legion's commander Manaroth. They held him off long enough for Malfurion to reverse the spell. The portal collapsed, dragging the demons and even Sargeras back into the void. But to complicate the matter even further, in secret, Illidan filled several vials with water from the well before it exploded. With the portal destroyed, the unstable energies of the Well of Eternity erupted into a cataclysmic event known as the Great Sundering. The ancient supercontinent of Kalimdor was shattered, much of the land sank into the sea, and countless kaldorei perished. Some were dragged into the depths of the oceans and transformed into the Naga, twisted sea creatures cursed by their arrogance. With most of the Highborn either dead or scattered, the surviving kaldorei turned away from the arcane. They returned to nature, settling in the sacred glades surrounding Mount Hyjal. But Illidan Stormrage had not abandoned magic. He poured the vials he had taken into a lake at the top of Mount Hyjal, creating a second Well of Eternity. For this act, his brother Malfurion had him imprisoned and placed under the watch of Maiev Shadowsong. Under the leadership of Tyrande Whisperwind, the Night Elves focused on healing and rebuilding. They left their ruined cities behind and lived simply, forming settlements like Nighthaven among the trees. In time, the Dragon Aspects returned. Upon discovering the new well, they feared that it might again draw the Legion's attention. To protect the world, they formed a pact with the Kaldorei. Alexstrasza planted a blessed acorn in the waters, and from it grew a mighty tree, Nordrassil, the first world tree. Nordrassil was planted to hide the well's presence from the cosmos, and to symbolize the balance between the arcane and nature. Nosdormu granted the Kaldorei immortality so long as the tree stood, and Ysera bound their spirits to the Emerald Dream, a realm of nature and harmony. In return, the Druids agreed to enter long periods of hibernation, allowing their spirits to travel the dream and aid in restoring the world. The cost of this deal was steep, but the Night Elves accepted it. They had learned that unchecked power comes with a price. This time, they chose harmony over ambition. After the War of the Ancients, Sargeras was far from impressed with Xavius. Furious over his failures, the Dark Titan subjected Xavius' spirit to torment. But instead of destroying him, Sargeras saw potential. He decided Xavius could still serve a purpose, just not in his original form. He became the first satyr. Upon returning to the world, Xavius was given 2 missions. The first was to corrupt as many highborn as he could, turning them into satyrs like himself. The second was far more personal, to bring Malfurion Stormrage, the druid who had destroyed the Legion's portal, to Sargeras himself. But capturing Malfurion would prove harder than expected. During a fierce battle between the two, Xavius confronted the druid and his ally, a young night elf named Chandris Feathermoon. With her help, Malfurion struck a final blow. Using one of Chandris' arrows as a focus, he channeled nature's power and grew a great tree that absorbed Xavius' essence, sealing his body and spirit within. Strangely though, that tree survived the Great Sundering, and was later found on the shores of Azshara near the Coral Sea, still holding the cursed remains of Xavius. Now, I know you might be wondering, what does a tree infused with the soul of a demonic night elf have to do with any of this? And how does it relate to Teldrassil? It may seem like a footnote, but it's far more important than it appears. Around 4,500 years before the First War, Archdruid Fandral Staghelm took it upon himself to combat a new growing threat, Saronite, a dark and mysterious metal surfacing across Azeroth. Unknown to many at the time, this metal was the blood of the old god, Yogg-Saron, seeping up from deep beneath the earth. Without consulting the Cenarian Circle, the organization that leads and safeguards the practices of the world's druids, Fandral took branches from Nordrassil and planted them over the recently surfaced, tainted sites, including a particularly large Saronite deposit in the Grizzly Hills. From this, a new world tree grew, Andrassil, meaning crown of the snow. Though furious at Fandral's recklessness, Malfurion and the other druids of the Cenarian Circle admitted the plan seemed effective, but that peace did not last. Soon, violence erupted between the Taunka and the forest nymphs of Northrend. Their conflict was uncharacteristically savage and unrelenting. Concerned, the Cenarian Circle sent an expedition to investigate, and what they found was horrifying. Andrassil's roots had burrowed so deep they were touching Yogg-Saron's prison. The old god's influence had begun to seep into the tree, warping it and everything around it. Andrassil had no defense against this corruption. In the end, there was no saving Andrassil. With heavy hearts, the Cenarian Circle decided to cut down the tree. It was then renamed to Vordrassil, meaning broken crown. Though these newly planted trees stopped the spread of the Saronite, the damage was far worse than they thought. Unbeknownst to the druids, Yogg-Saron had used the roots of these great trees as gateways into the Emerald Dream. Through these breaches, seeds of corruption were sown. Over time, those seeds would grow, spreading decay through Asera's once pristine realm. This marked the beginning of a darkness that would come to be known as the Emerald Nightmare. Now stay with me, because this is where everything starts to connect. Exactly 10,021 years after the Great Sundering, after millennia of night elf solitude in the forests of a shattered Kalimdor, the world tree Nordrassil became the centre of a rising storm. Our story resumes during the Third War. The Eastern Kingdoms had fallen into chaos. Arthas Menethil, once the Prince of Lordaeron, had embraced darkness, spreading death as the scourge consumed the land. After the fall of Dalaran, Jaina Proudmoore gathered the remaining Alliance forces and sailed west to Kalimdor, following a vision sent by the mysterious prophet Medivh. Medivh revealed that the Burning Legion had returned. He urged the Horde and the Alliance to put aside their hatred and unite against this far greater threat. Meanwhile, Tyrande Whisperwind and her sentinels encountered the Legion firsthand. She saw the scale of the invasion and realized only the ancient powers of the Druids could stop it. She awakened Malfurion Stormrage, her former love, and together they set out to awaken the other sleeping druids. Tyrande, on a separate path, found the prison of Illidan Stormrage. Believing his strength would be vital in the war to come, she freed him, despite the warnings of others. Illidan swore to fight the Legion and set off into Felwood, and it was there he clashed with Arthas, who enticed him toward a powerful artifact, the Skull of Gul'dan. Tempted by its strength, Illidan consumed the demonic power within and destroyed the Dreadlord Tichondrius, but it came at a cost. When Malfurion and Tyrande discovered what he had become, Malfurion banished him. As the final battle in the Third War approached, Medivh brought the leaders, Thrall, Jaina, Malfurion and Tyrande together at Mount Hyjal. Strongholds were built to slow Archimonde's march towards the World Tree. Human, Orc and Night Elf forces stood together against the Legion. Archimonde tore through their defences, but it was all part of the plan. As the demon reached the summit of Mount Hyjal, Malfurion sounded the horn of Cenarius once more. The ancient spirits of the forest responded, sacrificing themselves in a great burst of energy that obliterated Archimonde and his army. Though victorious, the Night Elves paid a heavy price. Their sacred world tree, Teldrassil, blessed by the dragon aspects to grant them immortality, was sacrificed in the final explosive effort to destroy Archimonde. With its fall, the Night Elves lost their protection from age, illness, and mortality itself. In the years following the war, Teldrassil slowly began to recover, but just 2 years after Archimonde's defeat, Archdruid Fandral Staghelm and a group of his followers sought to create a new world tree, one that would hopefully restore the Night Elves' lost immortality. Malfurion warned them against the act, but when he mysteriously fell into a coma, his spirit lost within the Emerald Dream, Fandral pressed forward unchallenged and assumed leadership of the Druids. And so, the second world tree, Teldrassil, was planted on a small island off of Kalimdor's northern coast. Over time, it grew to pierce the clouds, and within its vast boughs, the Night Elves built the city of Darnassus. Darnassus stood as a reflection of Night Elven culture. Its graceful bridges, tranquil groves, and winding leaf-covered paths paid a tribute to their deep bond with nature. At the heart of the city rose the Temple of the Moon, a magnificent sanctuary that served as a spiritual centre for High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind and the Sisters of Elwynn. Teldrassil, like all world trees, was connected to the very life force of Azeroth. Unlike Teldrassil, however, Teldrassil was not blessed by the dragon aspects at its creation. Just like Andrassil in Northrend, it was exposed to corruption. Nosdormu, the bronze aspect whose blessing had once granted the Night Elves eternal life through Teldrassil, refused to bless the same gift upon the new tree, Teldrassil. He viewed their desire as rooted in arrogance, a lesson unlearned from the past. Though Teldrassil appeared to thrive as it grew skyward, corruption had already begun to fester deep within its roots, slowly spreading through the surrounding lands. Grown unnaturally fast over just 2 years, the tree was unstable. For young Night Elves, the journey began beneath the boughs of Teldrassil, in the serene glade of Shadow Glen. Newly awakened to the world, these adventurers were guided by Ilthalain, who taught them the fundamentals of survival, nature, and duty. Their earliest tasks were humble but vital, cleansing corrupted patches of fell moss and defending the forests against the increasingly aggressive Nalpine firbolgs. Whispers from the forest spirits hinted at a deeper corruption and the fact that it had never been blessed by the dragon aspects. Harpies had taken to the skies, satyrs crept through the shadows, and the very essence of the land felt unsettled. Before they could leave Teldrassil for the wider world, these young heroes had to prove themselves. They fought back against the spreading corruption, purged the threats plaguing the forests, and earned their place among their people. But as they soared from the boughs of Teldrassil on the back of a hippogriff, heading for Darkshore and beyond, one question still remained. How long could Teldrassil withstand the darkness festering at its heart? So, where was all the corruption coming from? The answer lies beyond the physical world, in the Emerald Dream, the sacred and primal realm of nature tied to the Night Elves' deepest spiritual roots. It was here that the corruption truly began to take hold. As corruption continued to seep into the Emerald Dream, the Druids grew weaker, their connection to nature being strained. This same corruption was spreading through Teldrassil and affecting the land around it. But that was just the beginning. In the years that followed, the situation would spiral into something far more serious. The old god N'Zoth, long slumbering in the depths of the world, had begun laying the groundwork for the Hour of Twilight, the prophesied moment when the old gods would break free from their prisons and bring about the end of all life on Azeroth. To set his plan in motion, N'Zoth reached into the dream and found a perfect pawn, the tormented, imprisoned soul of Xavius. Twisted by the old gods, Xavius set out to spread his corruption deep within the Emerald Dream. His first move was to manipulate Fandral Staghelm, turning him into a willing servant. Under Xavius' influence, Fandral grafted a fell-tainted branch taken from Xavius' own corrupted tree into the new and young world tree, Teldrassil. Through this dark connection, Xavius established a presence in both the physical world and the Emerald Dream. This bond between the worlds granted him the power that would define him as the Nightmare Lord. Malfurion Stormrage investigated strange disturbances within the dream up until the 27th year when Xavius captured his dream form. Trapped between realms, Malfurion could not awake in Azeroth. With Fandral keeping his physical body weak and vulnerable, he inflicted mental torture and slowly altered his body into that of a tree. Xavius continued to expand the reach of the nightmare, corrupting more creatures and spreading fear throughout the dream. We don't need to go into the details, but in the end, Xavius was defeated, and with his fall, the grip of the nightmare weakened. Malfurion was eventually able to remove the corrupted branch, restoring Teldrassil to a purer state, one closer to what it was always meant to be. Later, during the wedding of Malfurion and Tyrande Whisperwind, Alexstrasza and Ysera both bestowed their blessings upon the tree. These gifts from the Lifebinder and the Dreamer offered a renewed vitality and protection to Teldrassil, which would remain guarded by their grace until its final day. Despite all of this though, the tree could still not return the immortality the Night Elves once had. Without a blessing from Nozdormu, the aspect of time, the gift of immortality remained lost. Not long after, Teldrassil's recovery began to falter. Subtle signs of corruption returned, raising concerns that the Emerald Nightmare had not been fully vanquished. Even with the political tensions of the time and the devastation left by the Cataclysm, the Night Elves focused their efforts on helping Teldrassil. The corruption they found in the tree was not new, it was a lingering remnant of the original taint, rooted so deeply within Teldrassil that it could not be purged without destroying the tree itself. Fortunately, the blessings of the dragon aspects was empowering Teldrassil to resist the corruption itself. Slowly, the tree was forcing the poison to the surface in a physical form that the Night Elves could confront and destroy. At the heart of this resurgence was the Bough of Corruption, the final trace of Xavius' influence upon the tree. It was the source of the fell moss that was twisting the gnarlpine, the timberlings, and other once peaceful inhabitants of the forest. After the third invasion of the Burning Legion, the world was left weakened, and a new danger emerged: Azerite, a mysterious and immensely powerful substance. Warchief Sylvanas Windrunner didn't see it as a gift, she saw it as a threat. She feared the Alliance would harness this new Azerite to forge devastating weapons, which could one day be turned against the Undercity, Silvermoon, and eventually the entire Horde presence on Kalimdor. To preempt this possibility, Sylvanas launched a calculated campaign to seize the World Tree Teldrassil. At the time, the Alliance used Darnassus, perched within the boughs of the tree, as a strategic harbour to transport Azerite from Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdoms. Controlling Darnassus meant cutting off the vital flow and denying the Alliance of critical advantage. As she prepared for the invasion of Teldrassil, Sylvanas gave the orders to Nathanos Blightcaller and Saurfang to secure the beachhead. During the preparations, Sylvanas encountered a mortally wounded Delarin Summermoon. Delarin pleaded with her, reminding Sylvanas of the person she once was, and condemned her war as one driven by hatred. She warned that while Sylvanas may be able to kill the Night Elves, she would never destroy their hope. These words struck at a nerve. Sylvanas, flashing back to her own failure to protect Quel'Thalas from the Scourge, responded coldly. To her, life was suffering, and hope was a lie. As Delarin lay dying, Sylvanas whispered that she grieved not for the kaldorei, but for her, for someone who still believed in hope. With that, Sylvanas turned Delarin's head to face Teldrassil one final time, and gave the command.
Burn it!
As the war shifted back to the mainlands of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, the Horde and the Alliance erupted into what would become the Fourth War, a conflict etched into history. Far from the front lines, the once majestic World Tree continued to smoulder. Its flames eventually died out, not by intervention, but by nature itself. All that remained was a blackened husk, a scar on the land, and a haunting monument to loss. The vibrant life, beauty and cultural legacy woven into its roots, now slowly fading into memory. Years later, a deeper truth emerged. The burning of Teldrassil had not just been a tactical strike, it was part of a far more sinister plan. Sylvanas Windrunner had been acting in service to the Jailer, a being from the Shadowlands who sought to disrupt the cycle of life and death. By igniting Teldrassil, Sylvanas created a catastrophic event with mass casualties, funneling countless Night Elf souls into the Moor. This act of horror was a deliberate move to feed the Jailer's power. And so, the tale of Teldrassil ends not in triumph, but in ashes. What was once a towering symbol of peace, power, and ancient beauty now stands as a charred monument to betrayal, loss, and the fragility of hope. Its roots reach deep into the history of the Night Elves, their dreams, their resilience, and their identity. But in one terrible moment, all of that was set ablaze. For those who remember the scent of its groves, the songs sung beneath its boughs, and the lives lost in its fall, Teldrassil will never just be a memory. It will be a wound, a warning, and a reminder of what happens when hope is burned and vengeance takes root. Okay, so we've just passed the 45-minute mark, and now we're heading back to the Eastern Kingdoms to explore the lore and the history of the Elwynn Forest. But before we go any further, a quick note here. We originally covered this story about 18 months ago, and since then our style and quality has evolved quite a bit. Let me know what you think of the progression in the comments below. The Elwynn Forest, a vast woodland that sits below the foothills of the Burning Steppes. It neighbours the calm Red Ridge Mountains in the east, lies north of Westfall, and is separated from Duskwood by the Nazvariti River. It is the very heart of the human kingdom of Stormwind, featuring a blend of winding rivers, lakes, dense forests with tall trees, and lush glades. The region benefits from frequent rains, nurturing its fertile farmlands. While humans inhabit the Elwynn Forest, it's also home to murlocs in some of the lakes, and various creatures like kobolds, gnolls, bears, wolves, spiders, and boughs, all contributing to its rich wildlife. The story of the Elwynn Forest remains shrouded in mystery before the establishment of Stormwind ages ago by the Arathi bloodline of Stromgarde. Therefore, a brief yet concise overview of Stormwind's establishment serves as an ideal starting point for this narrative. For ages, the early human tribes thrived in the Eastern Kingdoms, engaging in continuous conflicts over territory and dominance. Situated on the northeastern borders between the human lands and the Amani Empire, the Arathi tribe engaged in prolonged battles with these forest trolls. The endurance of Arathor lasted for more than 1,000 years, and it gradually fragmented into the Seven Kingdoms. Around 1,200 years before the events of the Dark Portal, the noble families of Strom aimed to depart the Arathi highlands to settle in the more fertile northern regions of Lordaeron. Despite Thoradin's heirs arguing against abandoning Strom, the nobles still departed. The remaining Arathi descendants also left Arathor, journeying southward to establish the kingdom of Stormwind. After traversing the rugged mountains of Khazmodan, their arduous journey culminated as they settled in the northern reaches of the continent, confusingly christened Azeroth. In a verdant valley, they established the realm of Stormwind, swiftly emerging as a self-sustaining power. Initially, the Kingdom of Stormwind stood as the smallest and most secluded human nation, but it gradually thrived through the cultivation of numerous farmsteads in the fertile surroundings. As Stormwind's populace expanded, small towns sprouted around Elwynn Forest, the Red Ridge Mountains, Brightwood and Westfall, with the latter being renowned as the kingdom's breadbasket. Across several centuries, devout clerics from the Church of the Holy Light ventured south from Lordaeron, spreading their faith upon reaching Stormwind and establishing the Holy Order of the Northshire Clerics. The kingdom found steadfast support from the Knights of the Brotherhood of the Horse. A more fitting name they went by were the Knights of Azeroth. These knights swore allegiance to the Kingdom of Stormwind and protected it with unmatched valour. Before delving deeper into Stormwind's history, we will wrap up the tales on this city. While a comprehensive narrative about Stormwind City awaits in a separate tale, for now let's return to the heart of this story in the Forest of Elwynn. We will occasionally revisit Stormwind when its relevance emerges within this narrative. As previously mentioned, owing to their prosperity in the region, the humans of Stormwind began exploring the forests of Elwynn and establishing smaller settlements on the outskirts of the main city. Apart from Stormwind City, one of the earliest settlements in the Elwynn Forest region is nestled within the Northshire Valley. Devout clerics from the Church of the Holy Light arrived in Stormwind and were allocated the Northshire Valley to construct their abbey and establish their residence. These clerics became integral to the kingdom, offering wisdom and solace during challenging periods. Utilizing the powers of the light, they provided comfort to the citizens of Stormwind and aided their kingdom's army in numerous battles. One of the other earliest settlements outside the city walls was one that would go on to become one of the most well-known and talked about towns in all of the world, Goldshire. Goldshire's roads connect it to Stormwind City in the northwest, Northshire Abbey in the northeast, Westfall in the west, and Lakeshire in the east. Its placement establishes it as a crucial trade centre. Travellers, merchants, adventurers, Stormwind guards, and abbey priests frequently pass through, often relishing the hospitality of the esteemed alehouse Lion's Pride Inn during their travels to and from Stormwind. The humans continued expanding and thriving within the Elwynn Forest for numerous years following the establishment of Stormwind City, up until approximately 75 years before the events of the Dark Portal. It was at this time when the residents of the Elwynn Forest traded in their pitchforks and their hoes for swords and axes, and dedicated all their resources to safeguarding their tranquil land against a formidable and ruthless adversary, the Gnolls. During the expansion of the kingdom's borders, the humans encountered packs of Gnolls in the region. These creatures, known for their vicious raids on human towns and convoys, posed a constant threat. However, the deployment of heavily armed groups comprising of soldiers and knights helped maintain some control over the situation, ensuring that Stormwind's territories and frontier regions were guarded. Despite efforts to contain the Gnoll threat, the reign of King Barathan Rhyn witnessed a drastic escalation in attacks. The Gnoll assaults reached such severity that even the fortified capital of Stormwind faced direct attacks. This dire situation was orchestrated by Packlord Garfang, a cunning and intelligent leader among the Gnolls. Garfang united various Gnoll packs, demonstrating remarkable strategic skills and amassing an organised army. Facing the imminent Gnoll threat and abandoned by neighbouring human kingdoms, King Barathan devised a bold plan. He led a small contingent of elite knights in a daring strike against Garfang's weakened defences in the Red Ridge Mountains. This daring move resulted in the successful elimination of the Packlord. The demise of Garfang sent shockwaves through the Gnoll population, triggering internal strife and power struggles. The infighting severely crippled the Gnoll's ability to mount large-scale assaults on the kingdom. With the Gnoll forces significantly weakened, King Barathan rallied Stormwind's armies and launched an offensive against the remaining Gnoll groups in Red Ridge. His strategic moves and decisive actions culminated in the defeat and near annihilation of the Gnolls in the region. This monumental victory reinforced Stormwind's belief in its self-reliance and capability to handle threats independently. However, this confidence would soon be tested, as the tragic consequences of their over-optimism would become apparent in the future. Following their triumph over the Gnolls, the denizens of Stormwind and the Elwynn Forest returned to their daily routines, turning the soil, nurturing their families, and sustaining themselves from the bountiful forests. However, the cycle of history on Azeroth often repeats itself, and conflict once again befell the lands of the Elwynn Forest. Roughly 5 decades later, with the tales of the Gnoll Wars being passed down to the succeeding generation, it was overshadowed by a new threat to the Kingdom of Stormwind, the Gurubashi Trolls. Around 18 years prior to the First War, the Gurubashi War erupted, involving a massive troll army laying siege to Stormwind City. The conflict had evolved from a series of smaller disputes between the factions, primarily over territories bordering Stranglethorn Vale, where settlers from Stormwind encroached upon. Despite attempts by King Barathan Rhyn to contain the situation, tensions heightened, eventually culminating in Prince Lane Rhyn leading an expedition to strike at the heart of the Gurubashi leadership in central Stranglethorn. This action united the trolls against Stormwind, nearly bringing it to ruin in retaliation for the assassination of their former warlord. However, the kingdom eventually emerged triumphant, largely owing to the intervention of the Guardian Medivh. Following the dispersal of the troll army at Stormwind City's gates, the southern jungle trolls never really posed a significant threat to the kingdom again. The war's end brought almost 2 decades of relative peace to Stormwind, a period that would eventually be interrupted by the outbreak of the First War against the Orcish Horde. The people of Azeroth were unaware of the grand scheme being orchestrated by the powerful human mage, Medivh. Seeking to destroy the kingdom of Stormwind and cause widespread chaos across the lands, Medivh collaborated with an otherworldly being named Gul'dan. Together, they utilized their arcane prowess to create a rift, the infamous Dark Portal, linking their two worlds. Through this portal emerged the savage Orcish horde, catching the inhabitants of Azeroth by surprise and instilling terror into their hearts. The detailed account of the First War spans across numerous battles and strategic moves. However, our focus will be on its impact specifically within the confines of the Elwynn Forest. A massive horde force besieged Stormwind, encircling the capital city. Fierce battles erupted at the city's defences, engulfing the surroundings in chaos. Yet, a surprise counterattack led by Anduin Lothar and the valiant Knights of Stormwind caught the Orcs off guard, compelling them to retreat temporarily. Nevertheless, the conflict escalated, leading to the destruction of Goldshire and Moonbrook, key settlements within the Kingdom of Stormwind. These two losses significantly weakened the kingdom. Orgrim Doomhammer, a mighty Orcish leader, directed his forces to besiege Stormwind Keep. The city's defences were tested to their limits, and eventually fell after the treacherous assassination of the now king, Lane Rin, orchestrated by Garona. With the Kingdom of Stormwind's collapse imminent, Anduin Lothar, realising the dire situation, gathered the remaining forces and civilians for a desperate retreat. They sought refuge in the northern kingdom of Lordaeron, beseeching King Menethil II for aid against the relentless Orcish onslaught. Following Stormwind's fall, the Orcish horde established dominance over portions of the Elwynn Forest, marking a bleak chapter in the kingdom's history. Continuing to the next chapter, we approach the events of the Second War. Our focus in this chapter won't delve into the intricate details of the conflict, as the Elwynn Forest's involvement held minimal significance within this narrative. We'll highlight only the relevant aspects. Following the fall of Stormwind, the newly appointed Horde war chief, Orgrim Doomhammer, embarked on a mission to conquer the remaining territories of Azeroth. Recognizing the imminent threat, a gathering of leaders from various human nations took place in Lordaeron, culminating in the establishment of the Alliance of Lordaeron. During the Second War, the Alliance armies forced the Horde back to the Thandalspan bridges, liberating Khazmodan in their pursuit. Engaging Doomhammer's forces in the Burning Steppes, the Alliance achieved a decisive victory, albeit at the cost of losing Anduin Lothar in battle. The war concluded after the climatic battle at the Dark Portal, leading to its destruction. Despite Lothar's absence, the Alliance reclaimed Stormwind's ruins, subsequently regaining control over Elwynn. The reconstruction of the city amassed substantial costs, straining Stormwind's economy and inciting dissatisfaction among its populace. This culminated in the formation of the Defias Brotherhood, composed mostly of discontented middle and lower class individuals, including the unpaid Stonemasons Guild, who had rebuilt Stormwind. Archbishop Alonzus Fail played a pivotal role in the reconstruction of Northshire Abbey. Additionally, he contributed to the establishment of a fresh clerical order, composed of clerics, priests and paladins, known as the Brotherhood of Northshire, serving as a recruitment centre for the Stormwind army. Nevertheless, against all odds, the Elwynn Forest managed to regain much of its former splendour. Over the next nearly 2 decades, time quietly advanced within the Elwynn Forests. It was during these decades the Scourge wreaked havoc in the northern territories of Lordaeron, and conflicts unfolded on the continent of Kalimdor. But this forest, situated in the southern region, was relatively isolated, and maintained an environment of growth and prosperity amidst the ongoing wars elsewhere. By the year 25, a mere 4 years following the Burning Legion's defeat in Kalimdor, the rebuilt capital city of Stormwind and its surrounding lands were flourishing once more. The Elwynn Forest witnessed a surge of fresh adventurers, exploring the terrain, seeking new residences, forging new connections, and earnestly pledging their service to the Kingdom of Stormwind in various capacities. The kingdom and the denizens of the Elwynn Forest warmly embraced this wave of new adventurers, frequently offering food, gold, enhanced armour, knowledge, and a spot by the fire at the Lion's Pride Inn, all in exchange for the adventurers' aid. It can be said that the inhabitants of the Elwynn Forest truly capitalised on these newcomers. They dispatched them into the forest to handle minor threats that marginally disrupted the otherwise tranquil life within the woodland. Adventurers initially made their way to Northshire Abbey, aiding Marshal McBride and the Brotherhood in reducing the wolf population, dealing with the threat from the Defias Brotherhood, and addressing the kobold issue in the mines. Many esteemed paladins, mages, priests, rogues, warlocks and warriors walked the halls of the Norcia Abbey, and righteously contributed to the Brotherhood's quest for peace. Upon restoring that peace in the Northshire Valley, many adventurers proceeded to Goldshire, a nearby town adjacent to Stormwind's gates. There they encountered locals like William Pessel, Marshal Duggan, and the infamous figure Remy Two Times. These inhabitants offered further training, wealth, and a safe stay at the Lion's Pride Inn in exchange for dealing with various threats throughout the forest. They succeeded in diminishing the kobold, bear, wolf, boar, and even the dreaded murloc populations. A notable triumph from within the Elwynn forests at this time was subduing the resurgent Gnoll pack dominating the southwestern Elwynn forest. The Gnolls, acting as agents for the Defias Brotherhood, the adventurers confronted Hogger, a Gnoll troubling the region known as Hogger Hill. In a battle that unfortunately led to the death of many adventurers, they managed to defeat the Gnoll. This restored a degree of peace to the forest. Over time, these pledged adventurers expanded their reach across the Kingdom of Stormwind, exploring areas like the Red Ridge Mountains, Westfall, and the darkness of the region now known as Duskwood, all after gaining more knowledge within their chosen specializations. Though minor threats persisted in the Elwynn Forest, the tales of riches and adventure within the Kingdom of Stormwind continued to spread across Azeroth, and new adventurers continuously arrived, offering their aid and ensuring that the region's dangers remained at bay. Years later, following the resolution of the Blackrock Mountain threat, the defeat of Onyxia, and Kel'Thuzad's downfall in Naxxramas, those adventurers returned to Stormwind City in Elwynn Forest to rest. However, respite was short-lived, as the impending doom loomed over the world during the Burning Crusade in year 26 and the Wrath of the Lich King in year 27. Elwynn Forest had its own ordeal during the Scourge invasion of Stormwind in the war against the Lich King. Despite the valiant efforts of Stormwind's residents and armies in repelling the Scourge, the conflict bore its own share of tragedy and loss. During the retaliatory campaign in Northrend against the Lich King and his forces, the Goldshire unit of the Stormwind army found an opportunity for retribution as part of the Valiant's expedition in the Howling Fjord. When the Scourge threat withdrew from the land, tranquility returned to the trees, allowing life to flourish across the region. However, the tranquility was shattered by the Cataclysm and the return of Deathwing. These events cracked the once natural defences around the kingdom, leaving openings for opportunistic enemies. The Blackrock clan and goblin assassins infiltrated Northshire. This prompted young human adventurers to repel them in a successful operation. At this time, to safeguard the forest, Stormwind infantry soldiers and patrolling Stormwind Royal Guards were deployed to defend Elwynn. The return of Deathwing marked the beginning of further conflicts across Azeroth, yet the residents of the Elwynn Forest were spared from the atrocities and battles that followed, occurring in distant lands like the Broken Isles, Pandaria, and more recently, the Dragon Isles. Due to the considerable distance between Elwynn Forest and these ongoing wars, it wasn't until year 35 that the forest faced a formidable enemy for a second time, the Scourge. This encounter happened during the war against the Jailer, which triggered an event known as Death Rising. The cataclysmic act of Sylvanas Windrunner shattering the Helm of Domination resulted in the Scourge running amok, wreaking havoc once more across the lands. To combat the undead threat, troops from the Stormwind Army and the Argent Crusade were mobilised to safeguard the region and its inhabitants. The Scourge were once again vanquished from the lands of the Elwynn Forest. Subsequently, peace gradually returned to the area, a phase in which we currently find ourselves in the world of Azeroth. Before concluding the tales of the Elwynn Forest, two significant events need mentioning. Throughout the year, the Darkmoon Fair set up at the outskirts of the forest town Goldshire, presenting the world's marvels. The origins of the Darkmoon Fair remain relatively unknown, but it's an unmissable source of fun if they're in town. Moreover, Goldshire encounters an attack from the Headless Horseman during the Hallow's End period in October. Further details about the Horseman and his motivations can be explored in our dedicated tale, accessible through a secure portal provided below. As we bring our journey through the history of Elwynn Forest to a close, we behold a landscape that has weathered the passage of time and the tumult of war. From the dark shadows cast by the Gnoll Wars in the year 75 before the Dark Portal, to the upheaval of the First and Second Wars, this land has witnessed countless struggles. Amidst adversity, Elwynn Forest has seen heroes rise and fall, bravery tested against insurmountable odds, and sacrifices made for the greater good. It has endured the onslaught of invading forces, stood strong amidst the chaos of battle, and over time emerged scarred, but ultimately undefeated. Through each era, the forest's ancient trees have stood witness to the valiant efforts of champions and the sorrow of those who have mourned the fallen. In the journey through Elwynn Forest's history, let us honour the spirit of its inhabitants who, amidst the ravages of time and the trials of war, have continued to rebuild, endure and nurture hope. As we stand at this moment in this timeline, let us remember the sacrifices made, the battles fought, and the enduring resilience that echo through the Elwynn Forest. And there we have it, another World of Warcraft lore supercut wrapped up. Wherever you may be in the world, and whatever you're doing, I hope you enjoyed this journey. Until next time, safe travels.